Hi everyone, today, let us explore the life cycle assessment of fertilizer together. Before that, let us have a look on what are we gonna go through today. First, the introduction, that introduces you what is fertilizer and their types. Second, the life cycle of fertilizer. It constitutes all the stages in fertilizer life cycle. Third, the impacts of fertilizer, especially to the environment. Finally, there are some mitigation measures recommended to reduce the impacts of fertilizer. Without further ado, let's move to the first part, introduction. What is actually fertilizer? They are chemical substances supplied to the crops to increase their productivity. Normally, the fertilizers contain the essential nutrients required by the plants, including nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. Fertilizers are commonly used by farmers because they enhance the water retention capacity of the soil and also increase its fertility. So, why is the use of fertilizers so popular now? No doubt, the world population is growing and dietary habits are changing. In 2020, the world population is expected to grow from about 7.8 billion to 9.8 billion by 2050. Also, with increasing wealth, per capita consumption of meat, refined fats, refined sugars, alcohols and oils is also increasing along with demand for consumer products that depend on agriculture such as certain textiles. Therefore, fertilizers are being used in significant quantities to provide a wide range of goods and services. There are several types of fertilizer being used nowadays. First of all, nitrogen fertilizer. It benefits in helping to grow large and stem new leaves continually. Besides, potassium fertilizer. It is ideal for photosynthesis and slow down any diseases. Next, phosphate fertilizer. It is useful to help strengthen the root system and stems of a plant. Next, the life cycle of fertilizer. What are all the stages in fertilizer life cycle? From the diagram, we can see that the fertilizer life cycle starts with raw materials acquisition, followed by the manufacture of fertilizer. Then, the third stage of fertilizer life cycle is the distribution of the product for usage later, and it finally comes to the end of life cycle. Now, we're going to look on more detailed for each stage of fertilizer life cycle. Starting with the fertilizer raw materials. There are basically three raw materials to be extracted. Firstly, potassium, which can be obtained from naturally occurring salts like potassium chloride. While for nitrogen, it can be acquired from natural gas, naphtha, fuel oil and coal. Lastly, phosphorus can be found in phosphate rock and sulfur. Moving on, the manufacture of fertilizer, it starts with granulating. One method of granulation involves putting the solid materials into a rotating drum which has an inclined axis. As the drum rotates, pieces of the solid fertilizer take on small spherical shapes. They are passed through a screen that separates out adequately sized particles. A coating of inert dust is then applied to the particles, keeping each one discrete and inhibiting moisture retention. Finally, the particles are dried, completing the granulation process. After granulating, it continues with blending. In the process, the different types of particles are blended in appropriate proportions to produce a composite fertilizer. The blending is done in a large mixing drum that rotates a specific number of turns to produce the best mixture possible. After mixing, the fertilizer is emptied onto a conveyor belt, which transports it to the bagging machine. And here ends the manufacture of a fertilizer. Next, there are many channels for the distribution of fertilizer. From the producers, the fertilizers are distributed to government land development and rehabilitation, National Farmers Association, wholesalers, private and estate agencies. And users can obtain fertilizers from these channels respectively as the chart shown. In order to help farmers procure fertilizers, the government has stimulated fertilizer consumption through subsidy and credit schemes, facilitated the supply and distribution of fertilizers through FELGA, RISDA, FELCRA and FO, stimulated the establishment of a large number of distribution points through farmers' cooperatives, improved the cost-value ratio between fertilizers and agricultural produce by providing price support, provided extension services, research on fertilizer use and quality control. For the fourth stage, usage of fertilizer, fertilizers are used for various purposes. For instance, to increase crop yields, improve quality of food and feed, reduce the amount of cropland required and reduce the need to convert land to agriculture. Last but not least, the end of life cycle. There are several ways to manage and dispose after the usage of fertilizer. First, to reduce. We should buy only needed amount or find alternatives for fertilizers. Furthermore, to reuse. We should look for others that might be able to use leftover fertilizer. In addition, to dispose. Since fertilizers are not recyclable, proper disposal is necessary. To do this, fertilizer must be stored in a cool, dry place. And never mix two types of fertilizer together, as this could result in a dangerous chemical reaction. Then, take unused fertilizer in its original container to a household hazardous waste facility. For the third part of this video, we're going to discuss about the impacts of fertilizer usage. What are the impacts of fertilizer on the environment? Climate change. Fertilizers are associated with greenhouse gas emissions to the atmosphere during their production, transport and use. The use of inorganic fertilizers contribute almost 40% of agricultural GHG emissions. Ecosystem health. Excess nitrogen and phosphorus contribute to the eutrophication of freshwater systems and coastal areas. Moreover, excess nutrients also cause other types of pollution of surface and groundwater, soil and air. Adverse health impacts. Contaminants in fertilizers affect soil quality and may enter the food web through uptake by plants and ingestion of contaminated food or feed. Other than that, toxic trace elements found in fertilizers may include mercury, cadmium, arsenic and lead. Finally, for the last part of our video today, let's explore on the mitigation measures. What can we do to reduce the impacts of fertilizer? First of all, the use of direct finance to encourage sustainable agriculture. The government can provide financial support to encourage adoption of technologies and practices that improve the use efficiencies of fertilizers. Aside from that, funds may be mobilized, for example, through taxes that penalize polluters and reward non-polluters. Apart from that, ecosystem-based approaches can be adopted. This approach uses environmental knowledge and takes into consideration other plant management factors that influence productivity. Also, providing knowledge and sharing it widely will expand the solution base for farmers and allow adoption of environmentally friendly and sustainable production systems. Aside from that, global policies on sustainable and safe use of fertilizers can be strengthened. Partnerships that encourage information sharing between scientists and global policymakers contributes to filling information gaps at the global level. Furthermore, participation by scientists in such partnerships improves chances that the global policies, decisions and suggestions emanating from them will be implemented. Thank you for listening, and that would be all.